guys, and welcome to today's video. I'm going to apologize about the lighting. I'm right next to a window and it's super like cloudy out. The clouds keep moving, the sun comes out and then it goes back and forth, so if the lighting's horrible, apologizing in advance. Hello, if you're new here, hi, welcome. I'm super glad you're here. I hope you stick around. My name's Abby and I make videos now all about being a nurse. I recently graduated from nursing school this past April. I took my NCLEX in May and it is now the end of June, almost July, and I'm set to start working as a nurse in my first new grad job in August. I make videos all about nursing and life and health and fitness and vlogs and being a military wife and literally everything now. So I hope you'll stick around. If you want to, you can go ahead and go down below and hit the subscribe button. And if you're not following me on Instagram, I'll put my Instagram name right here and you can go give me a follow if you're interested. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're not new here, hello. Today's video is going to be all about new grad residency programs. I posted on my Instagram and asked you guys to send me questions. I'm gonna jump into it and start answering them. So I'm gonna start off with just like a basic introduction to what a new grad residency program is. So if you have no clue what I'm talking about when I say a new grad residency program, what that is a position that you can apply for as a new graduate nurse. So a nurse that has recently graduated from school, passed her NCLEX, starting her first job or his first job as a nurse, you can apply to these programs. Some of them are only available to nurses that have never worked before as a nurse. You could have worked as a CNA or any other job, but never under your license as a registered nurse. Some jobs don't care. You could have previous RN experience or not. It just depends on the specific program you're looking at. What these programs are positions where you work as a new grad nurse. You work as a normal registered nurse like any other nurse, but the orientation is much longer, so it gives you a better grasp and like slowly moves you onto the floor and slowly gets you adjusted to taking full patient care than just like throwing you out to the wolves. So the orientation's longer. A lot of time there's extra classroom time, so you'll get classroom time to learn about policies and procedures, classroom time to learn about starting IVs and doing just extra skills that maybe you didn't get to do in nursing school. If you're in a specialty, it'll be classroom time related to that specialty. So for me, I'm going into the NICU, it'll be classroom time specifically about babies and what they're going through and the conditions they're experiencing and common procedures that will be done with them and things like that. So there's extra classroom time, there's extra orientation, but what I think is a better transition from the student role to the nurse role, it just provides a better transition from you going from being a nursing student to being a nurse. It gives you more time to adjust and you're with a preceptor for longer, and the program that I'm in specifically will start with healthier babies and then slowly work your way up to critical babies. Some of these programs do have contracts, some don't. So some of my friends are in new grad programs and they're not in a contract. So that means that at any point they could leave the unit, leave the hospital, whatever they want. You're not tied to it. My program specifically is a 2-year contract. So that means when I sign my contract, I am committing to staying on that unit and in that hospital for 2 years. The first year is the new grad residency program. The second year, you're just working like a normal nurse, and it's just kind of a way to like repay them for the education that they've given you throughout the course of the first year. There are certain requirements for the program, like mine. At the end of our first year, we'll do an evidence-based project, and you can do that as a group or an individual, and you pick a topic and present on that topic. Typically, you want to pick something relevant to the patient population you're working with. Other programs don't require that. That's kind of what a new grad program is. It's really just a way to help you transition easier from the role of a nursing student who just graduated and took her NCLEX to a full-on on your own girl nurse. 'Cause if you're gonna leave me, then just do it. So the application process is very interesting for these programs. It's going to vary state to state and hospital to hospital. Y'all should have seen my calendar on my phone back in like January. I put in my calendar the start date of the application window for every hospital, the day all the application windows closed for every hospital, the day that their program was slotted to start like working. I had all the information, so I definitely recommend looking into these programs early. I started looking the summer before my senior year, so the summer before I graduated, just so I had enough time to really prepare and adapt and make sure I was going to apply on time and all of that stuff. Most of these programs have what's called an application window, like I said. So that means that if you go onto their website, that's where you'll find all this information. Go to the hospital's website, go to their career page, and go to like the nursing tab, or just go to the hospital website and then go to the nursing tab. Typically you'll find another tab that says New Grad Nurse Residency Program, and you can click on that and find more information there. But most of them have these windows because they have cohorts. A cohort of new grad nurses will start relatively soon after students graduate nursing school. So like my hospital will do one in August because students graduate in May. They'll do one in January or February for students that graduate in December. And then I think they offer one, not every year, but some years in like October-ish for anyone that graduated over the summer. These cohorts only happen a few times a year, and they're based on students that have newly graduated because like I said, my hospital, you cannot have worked as a nurse before. Some other hospitals have cohorts more frequently because they don't care if you've worked before or not. Again, look at your hospital's policies and just look on their website. You'll find all this information. But they also have application windows based around those cohort start times. So my cohort is starting in August. So the application window for the hospital I'm at opened March 16th and closed April 12th. So there was about a month window in there where you had time to get your application sent in and submitted. After April 12th, once the application window closes, you can't apply. You wouldn't be able to get into any of these units in this hospital because they don't accept nurses that are fresh out of college unless they're in one of these programs. So that's why it's really important to pay attention to these dates, because if you miss the application window, you could completely be losing out on an entire hospital that you potentially wanted to work at. Definitely look at the dates on their website, and then the application process from there was pretty easy. On their website, they listed out everything they wanted in what order. Just go on their website and hopefully you can find it from there, but it's pretty straightforward after that. It's just submitting everything online in the way that they want it submitted.
Here we are in the car, let me see who you are.
That's a great question, and it's going to vary state to state. So in Colorado, where I live, pretty much only nurse residency programs. Like, there were positions that were regular nurse positions that I applied for just because I was curious, and immediately got an email back where they were like, hey, please see our nurse residency program and apply there. So basically they're saying like the only way to get in without previous experience is through one of these programs. So it's really up to your state. I have a friend that lives in North Dakota and she'd never heard of these programs before. So in her state, they're not common and you can just apply to a normal position. So just look into the hospitals around you and see what they require.
Let's be honest.
So most hospitals have one nurse residency program, and it's just across the board. So there could be 500 new nurses in this program, but they're all split up amongst different units. The hospital I work at, or I'm going to be working at, what they did was, one of the questions was list your top 3 units that you'd want to work on and why, in order from like the one you want the most to the middle one to the one you like are the least excited about, and give explanations for each one. My top pick was the NICU, and that's the only job I heard from for an interview, and that's the job that I got.
You really are, yeah. Don't need you here to say you're sorry.
Okay, yeah, so I think that's basically exactly what I just explained, that the hospital that I got a job with had us rank the units that you wanted in like your number 1 top pick, your second pick, and your third pick, and then those units that you requested have to reach out to you and ask you to interview. So like I put NICU, PICU, and Med-Surg. I never heard from PICU and Med-Surg, but I heard from NICU and they were my number 1. So I think that's how it works. The hospitals I interviewed with do, because I interviewed with 2 different hospital systems that have mom baby and postpartum. Something to keep in mind is every year it changes, and every cohort it changes. So if they hired a bunch of postpartum new grad nurses in January, they may not be hiring any in May because they're full from January. Every cycle it can change. Not every unit is hiring all the time, kind of like a normal position. Not every unit's hiring all the time, but there are mom baby postpartum new grad residencies.
Someone to save
I don't know much about Mayo Clinic. I know it's a great hospital, but I don't know specifically tips for that hospital. What I can say that I think helped me was I spent so much time, I'm not even kidding guys, days and days and days rewriting my resume and rewriting my cover letter and rewriting my supplemental application. I had as many people look over that stuff as possible. I have a friend that has nothing to do with healthcare, but she works in PR, so I sent it to her. She's really great at like writing professional emails and writing professional stuff, so I had her look at it and like edit it for me. I sent it to some coworkers of mine, had them edit it for me. I sent it to teachers. I sent it to literally everyone. Anyone you can think of that you respect from a professional standpoint that you think would help you, send it to and get them to look it over, because cover letter is the first thing they're gonna see. So you really want to make yourself stand out in that, because that's what they're looking at first, and if that doesn't grab their attention, they're not even gonna look at the rest of your resume. You know, the first thing you have to do is get an interview. So you really want your cover letter and your resume, and if there's a supplemental application, any of those things that they want you to submit, you want those things to make you stand out and really show them like, okay, yes, we want to interview this person. So try and make that stuff stand out as much as you can.
Let's be honest for a second.
I brought not a portfolio, but I brought a folder with some like blank notebook paper in it to answer, like I wrote out questions that I had for the unit, and I could write down their answers on that. I printed out a bunch of copies of my resume. I also put together a little piece of paper that I stapled behind my resume that had like a couple different paragraphs that were just snippets of things that people from my reference letters had to say. Instead of a whole letter of reference, it was just like a couple good things about me that people had to say. That was all I brought. I know that people say to bring a portfolio, but honestly, no one asked for it. At the job that I was offered, that I accepted, they didn't even take my resume. They already had them printed out with them. So I don't think you need to bring a whole portfolio, but it's totally up to you. As for the format, I will link, it's not going to be my exact one with my information on it, but I'll put like a mock-up version of the resume that I used and the template that I used. I will link it down below. A few of mine were on Zoom and by phone call, because I did interview with multiple hospitals. They were by Zoom and phone calls. They were a little bit different, and that was mostly because of COVID. The last two interviews I had were both in person, and they were both panel interviews. The first one had 6 or 8 people, and then the second one had 3 people. So you basically just sit in a room and they just do like a round robin where every person asks you a different question. They just go around the table asking you question after question after question. I know some hospitals do multiple rounds of interviews, so you might get called back for another one if it's a really big hospital, or it was really competitive and there were a lot of people, so you could be prepared for that. But that's kind of what the interview process looked like for me.
No, and don't come running to blame me.
The hardest one for me was, why should we hire you? I was not expecting that. It was at the end of my very first interview, and I just wasn't expecting to have to like sell myself. I just felt weird about it, and the way they worded it was, why should we hire you opposed to someone else? So at first I felt like I needed to compare myself to other people, but then I realized like, no, they just want to know my strengths. So I think that was the hardest one. So just be prepared to really have some thoughts in your mind about like why you're a good candidate. I know you're a good candidate and you probably know why, but having thought about that stuff beforehand is really important, because after I was asked that question, I knew going forward how I would answer it.
So don't be gentle, no, I just gotta know if you're gonna leave me.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I really feel this, especially for my NICU interview. If you guys don't know this, I was preemie, and so that makes me very emotional when speaking about the NICU, because I 5,000% credit the nurses that cared for me during my first 3 months of life in the NICU for the life I have now. I get feeling emotional, and I think it's okay. Obviously, like, don't turn into a puddle of tears and you still want to get your point across, but I think it's totally okay to show your emotion and your why, because that's why you want to work where you want to work, and that's why you're passionate about this job, and that's why it's going to make you a good nurse, and that's why they should want you as a part of your team. So yeah, heck yeah, use that, girl. On a personal level, I think they're going to relate to that. Obviously remain professional and collect yourself if you need to before you carry on, but I think it's totally okay to show emotion and be authentic and honest and real. I think that's amazing.
Never do. Here we are in a car, let me see who you
I think the biggest thing is, like, one, I practice questions obviously for like weeks leading up. The day before, I try and like chill and not really think about it, not go over my questions too much, because you don't want to just like overload your brain. On the way, like the drive to the interview, I try and listen to like pump up music or whatever makes you feel good. So like I listen to like some Christian worship music, and then I completely change the mood and listen to some like hype up girl. Don't be afraid to pause and take a second while you're in it. If they ask you a question, just take a second to breathe and take a deep breath, and take a deep breath before you go in, and remind yourself that you're capable and you can do this. And it's okay to be nervous, because that means that you are excited and you care, and that's totally right.
'Cause if you're gonna leave me, then just do it.
No. So let's see, I haven't really talked about this, but I interviewed for a step-down ICU. I interviewed for the NICU, which is the position that I accepted. I interviewed a labor and delivery mom baby, like for both labor and for mom baby, for 2 different hospitals. And then I interviewed for a post-op floor. So 5 places I interviewed for. One of them canceled their new grad program altogether, so that was out. Mom baby labor did not offer me a position, and those were both canceled. And then the ICU step down and the post-op floor, I was offered those positions, and the NICU I was offered. The NICU was the one that I accepted. So I didn't get to tour the mom baby labor because that one got canceled. The other mom baby labor that I interviewed for, I didn't tour because the interview was at like a separate building because of everything going on with COVID, so I didn't get to like shadow or do anything with. The ICU step down and the post-op floor were both Zoom/phone call interviews. Again, because of COVID, so no, I couldn't tour or shadow. The NICU, I did not shadow, but I did get a tour of the unit. It wasn't ever anything I was offered in any of those positions, so I'm not totally sure, but I did get a tour of the NICU, which was super nice. I'd like to know about the turnover on the unit. So is this a unit where nurses are staying for 10, 20 years and they love it? Or is this units where people are trying to get off of as fast as possible? Because if people are leaving very quickly, there's a problem. I ask what the biggest challenge is that they find new grad nurses having on their unit. I try and ask about scheduling and what that looks like. So in a new grad program, if you're with a preceptor for orientation, what does that schedule look like? Are you with one preceptor the whole time? Do you have a backup preceptor if your original preceptor goes on vacation? Do you get to make your own schedule, or do you only work when they work? Can you work overtime? Like, what does that look like? Which sometimes I don't have the answer to, and that's where there are opportunities to be on a committee or be a charge nurse or work with students. How does that kind of progression look like? Will you float as a new grad nurse to other floors, or are you just going to stay there? What's the patient population look like? So is this a hospital that served an underserved population? Do you get patients from out of state? What type of patients are typically seen? So like in the NICU, do you see a ton of preemies, or do you see a ton of chronic kids? Like, what is that looking like? And then a timeline for decision. You always want to know when are you expecting to hear back from them, because then you can follow up. If they say you'll hear back in 2 days and it's been a week and you haven't heard, you should probably reach out, because it's good to get an answer either way. Tell me about a time when you worked with a difficult coworker. Tell me about a time when you worked with a difficult patient. Tell me about a time, they're literally all tell me about a time when, blah, blah, blah. Fill in the blank. Tell me about a time when you saw a coworker make a mistake and what you did to help them fix it, or how they could have fixed it. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake. Tell me about a time when you helped improve patient safety and created a better outcome because of that. Tell me about a time when you had a disagreement with a coworker. Tell me about your strengths, your weaknesses. Daisy? Want to come in?
You said you love for me something brand new.
As far as I know, yes. From what I've heard, yeah. Because at the job that I accepted, they asked me if I'd taken it yet and if I had passed, and so that was kind of an indicator to me that if I hadn't taken it yet, that they would hold it. But if you fail, I don't know what the circumstances with that. I think it kind of just depends. They obviously want you to pass, and if they can give you time, I think that they will, but I don't know. I think that's kind of unit by unit.
Don't take it slow, don't be gentle. No, I just gotta know.
So kind of just explained this already, but just go to the hospital's website, go to the career page, and then go to nursing and see if there's stuff about new grad residency. If they don't do that, and you can just apply to a normal job, RN position, you can go to the hospital's website, go to career, and then look up registered nurse, or you can just look up registered nurse jobs on Google. This is not something I ever bring up in interviews. I don't think it's really professional to bring up, to be completely honest, because the people that are interviewing you have nothing to do with what you're getting paid. That's an HR thing, and typically there's no wiggle room when it comes to being a new nurse with no experience. Typically, when you have no experience, it's a flat rate across the board for all new grad nurses, and there's really no like negotiating that.
Said this is something you would never do. Here we are.
Looking at the camera, smiling, making eye contact, not like looking around. Make sure your background's clean. Make sure you look nice. Don't like wear PJ bottoms if they can see your pants. Yeah, just make sure you look as professional as possible.
Then just do it. Don't take it slow. Don't be gentle.
I started looking like a year in advance. Do not wait until after. You should honestly probably be applying like the semester before you graduate. So like if you graduate in May, start applying in January or whenever the new grad programs open. But no, if you're waiting until after you graduate, you are behind. Talked about this. I applied for everything. I knew that I wanted NICU, but I also know that it's a specialty. It's highly competitive, and just because I want it doesn't mean I'm going to get it. So I went into it with the mindset of whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I'm going to spread my eggs out everywhere and not put them in one basket. I'm going to apply to every hospital, every new grad program, every job that will interview me, I will interview with, and we'll see what happens. Because yes, I wanted NICU, and I was hopeful that I would get to this point if I was patient. So I really made sure that I applied to everything.
Save me, no, and don't come running to play.
It's gonna be the last one. So I think that they all felt similar in a way that they all asked the same questions of like, give me an example when. I think that they all felt different in the aspect of, although NICU was the one I was most excited for and I didn't feel nervous about it because I felt like I could really get my point across of like why I want this. But at the same time, it was the most pressure and it was the most intimidating and it was the most difficult interview I've had. So there were interviews that were so much easier. Like, I don't know, they just felt easier. They felt more laid back. That one felt the most challenging. It was very hard, but it pushed me. Yeah, for the most part, they're the same in the aspect of they all ask the same questions. Everybody wants to know the same stuff relatively. The NICU job was the hardest interview I had because they asked questions I hadn't had before. Harder questions, I would just look up and Google and try and find as many like personality type questions that you can. So give me an example of a time when. So any exposure to those type of questions that you can get, the better. And just practice your booty off. So that is my Q&A for the new grad residency program, for the interview process and applications and all of that good stuff. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them down below. You could leave a comment or you can send me a DM. Like I said before, if you're new here, I'd love for you to stick around, so please go below and hit that subscribe button. I'll put my Instagram name here. If you want to follow me, you can give me a follow. But that's it for today's video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.